Hi, Clint. How you doing today?
Good, Craig.
That's the way. What time is it now? It's 3 hours. 3 hours ahead. 3 hours ahead.
It's 10 to 9 at night here. So yeah.
Excellent. So the rugby league has finished, but your job, I'm assuming, doesn't finish. You're probably just as busy, or even busier as you are now. So what's been happening since the grand final for you, work-wise, and just have you taken time off, or are you still sort of working hard?
Yeah, no, we don't really get a whole lot of time off. Well, none at the moment.
Yes.
That's going to come hopefully sometime soon. But yeah, obviously on the back of a sensational season, we now go into really sort of in review mode and planning mode for 2022. Working through a number of different things, obviously with the NRL and the clubs. We've obviously got our CBA negotiations that will commence, in the coming weeks or a couple of months. So really, it's still a busy time for the game. Particularly when you're trying to prepare for the upcoming season and what lies ahead for everyone really. And obviously we've got a new announcement following the Dolphins coming into the competition in 2023. So we're obviously working through a process at the moment where there's where players are starting to go back to training. So there's some things there that we need to continue to work through, like protocols and vaccinations and a number of other different things. So yeah, there's plenty happening. It's the game that never sleeps. So
that's right. And how exciting is it to have the Dolphins coming in 2023? I mean, that's just great for rugby league in general, right?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see. Anytime we're going to provide more opportunities to play at the elite level, I would like to think that it's going to increase our participation numbers and opportunities for not just players but staff and administrators to join the NRL. I think it's a great thing, and obviously they've made a commitment for further investment in junior development and women's pathways, which I think is fantastic. So yeah, I think the Dolphins are really going to disrupt the market, particularly given the fact that Wayne Bennett's coaching them. Obviously, they're a passionate rugby league club with a long and rich history. So it should be interesting times.
Top notch. Can't get much better than Wayne Bennett, and there's all like in the media trying to poach players from different clubs. So I guess for the fans it brings more excitement into it. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. So anyway, Clint, first question I want to ask, and I ask with all my sort of guests that come onto the show. I want to talk about COVID, and I want to talk about how you got through that. Did you have to sort of cancel anything? And especially for the rugby league, I mean, I think we got 2 rounds into the season, and then we had to stop. So for you, just tell us about, and you for your family as well. Are they staying safe and healthy?
Yeah, it was incredibly challenging time, for the game, for the community, for the country, for the world, really. And it was largely one of the first times, arguably since World War II, that sport really, felt the effects of something as significant as that. And where we were forced to shut down, and just like just about every other code in the world, rugby league had to do that and had to rebound and recover. Obviously, it was difficult given the fact that there was so much uncertainty, a lot of unknowns, with regards to COVID, transmission rates, how it was being transmitted, what level of protection we were able to provide. Everyone was really doing everything they can to try and better understand what was just really a new virus. For me personally, I became CEO on the Friday in March, and the comp was over on Monday. So it was
Wow.
it was a quick baptism of fire for myself. But I was I was pretty fortunate. I had a really good team internally. We were obviously extremely well connected with the playing group. Had a strong board and strong relationships in the rugby league community, which gave us really the best opportunity to do what we had to do, which was ensure that players were protected and that we prioritised the health and safety of our people. But also players chose to go back. They chose to go back and start training. It was the first contact sport in the world to go back, or first contact team sport. Was the first code in the country to return. And obviously it was a sensational effort by many different people across several different stakeholder groups, and it really demonstrated what we're able to do in really trying circumstances when we're all working together for one common goal, and that was the protection of our people and to give the people their game back, and we did that.
Absolutely. And Peter V'landys, and great job. But I'm sure it was not just him. It was, like you said, a whole bunch of people behind the scenes, making it just as good. And that those first 2 weeks, it was all just up in the air. And for you, like on a personal level, were your family, did they all stay safe? And how was it adapting, like having a family of yourself?
Yeah, I think that was the part that it was at times hard to separate, given the fact that you were so deeply immersed in work, when you knew how many people were relying on us to make good decisions, that were in the best interests of, again, our people, prioritised, the health and safety of our people. But also we knew that if we couldn't get the game back, a lot of people were going to be in vulnerable positions. And so it was a difficult time for my family, given the fact that I got 2 young girls, and my wife, who's English. Obviously, there was a lot of challenge there with regards to the borders closing, inability to travel, and just like the rest of the world, really, like we were trying to deal with it the best we can. But it was difficult because the job became really a 24/7 news cycle that was constantly in the public domain, given the significance of what was going on, but also the importance of sport and the importance of rugby league for our community. It was a never-ending work stream, but it was also deeply rewarding as much as it was really challenging. I thought it brought the playing group together. It brought the industry together for the first time, I would suggest, in several years, where we were, somewhat fractured, before that. And it also brought, our staff together in a way that was able to play our role in getting the games back and ensuring that players were not only just protected, but also fairly remunerated, and they received the benefits and entitlements that reflected their contribution to the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And now, what's the latest update with the COVID? Are they sort of planning for sort of next season with COVID sort of restrictions, or are they going to still keep it the same, or it's just a wait and see?
Yeah, I mean, it's always changing. I think, largely at the moment it's down to public health orders, which vary from state to state.
Yes.
So it's really trying to develop some protocols in partnership with the NRL. And obviously, given the fact that the clubs are the employers of the players, they have obviously an incredibly important role to play to ensure that, players and staff are complying, that they understand what their obligations are, and that they're also providing a safe workplace for arguably the game's greatest asset in the players. So, there's still plenty of work to do. Again, we're sort of walking on moving sands all the time, so it can be challenging. But again, it's I think during these times, communication is fundamental to getting the best outcomes, and that's certainly what the RLPA and myself are trying to prioritise.
Yeah, absolutely. And just getting off that, like, I'm a big Knights fan, and I watched a lot of your games playing for the Knights and not playing for the Knights as well. So can we just talk a little bit about the Knights season? There was all sort of, I think they might make the top 8. They've got a good team if they stay if they stay healthy. But in the end, they got there, but just not good enough. So what was your spin on it?
Yeah, I thought it was an improvement from previous years. Obviously, they've gone through a challenging transformation over the last several seasons. Yes. So I think with now the second season in for Adam O'Brien, I thought he could start to establish some stronger foundations for the team to build on. Obviously, there's always challenges with injury and performance and whatnot. And obviously there was significant upheaval for 12 of the teams that had to relocate to Queensland for the last couple of months of the season. So I thought it was an okay performance this year. I think it's still plenty to build on, but there's such they've got such a strong history of performing well, and obviously they play a significant role for the community in Newcastle and the Hunter Valley. So you really, I think the game's in a better position when the Knights are performing well and at the towards the top of the table. Absolutely.
And I was there like for some of the first games. My dad used to take me when I was a little kid, sit on the hill and watch Sammy Stewart and Butterfield and Glanville. So I've definitely seen like a bit of it's like an up and down. You go through the good and the bad, but I think it's a positive thing. I think maybe 1 or 2 good signings for next season. We're steering in the right direction. So yeah.
So hopefully look forward with optimism.
And do you still just personal do you still live in Newcastle, or have you moved out of Newcastle area now?
No, I live on the Central Coast now. So
Central Coast.
Last couple of years. So yeah, just needed to be closer to Sydney. So it's been a good move for us.
Right, understand. Okay, so Clint, let's go back to when you were born. And I found this interesting that you actually weren't born in Australia. It says that you were born in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, in the USA.
Yeah, yes, I was. I'm a septic tank. Yeah, it's my father was playing in the US on the US tour. Obviously, he used to bounce around between the European tour and the Australasian tour, and obviously the US. So yeah, when he played in the US, our home base was in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and he was over there just around, I think, the US Open period, and I happened to be born during that time and in the US. So it's been good. We only spent a couple of years there, on and off, and then obviously after my father's accident, we moved back to Australia in Newcastle.
Was it difficult at that time? I mean, your dad was, an amazing golf player. Was it difficult, like with him not being there, or did you did you travel with him, or how does it sort of work when you were born and when you were growing up in the US?
Yeah, I mean, my mum did a incredible job. I think most parents, back then, under the conditions, of air travel and the travel that was available to them was pretty scarce, and it certainly wasn't at the conditions that people are flying in it now. But with 2 kids, I had an older sister who was 2 years older than me, so traveling really around the world with 2 children, following dad on the professional circuit, it has its challenges. And golf is a particular sport where, where you live on one night is going to be determined by how well you play, in that tournament. So it can be challenging for the wives and the partners when, particularly when they're lugging around a couple of kids, and she was incredible, and But I mean, obviously I was pretty young during that period, and
Yes.
I don't have huge amounts of memories of it other than the footage and the photos that you see. But it was certainly I certainly think that Mum did a great job. That's for sure.
Yeah. And were you playing golf at that time? Is that something that you were really into as a kid as well? Or was it something that like you sort of didn't want to do? I mean, for example, my dad did karate for 30 years. He was a teacher, black belt, 6th Dan black belt, but I hated it. So for you, did you sort of want to be like your dad? I mean,
yeah, I mean, often, sometimes there's that drive to, to follow in your either parent's footsteps, particularly when my father was such a, successful golfer. Obviously, after he had his accident and lost his arm and his eye, that meant that his career was over, but a new chapter was about to begin, and that was, in commentating on golf and designing golf courses and really, continuing to be a father and a husband, which was obviously fundamental because he did have a choice, back then. He did have a choice to make whether or not that was it for him, and he just wanted to sit in the corner and blame the world for what had happened to him, particularly given the fact that he was still absolutely in his prime at 33 and still had a lot of things to achieve. But for me, I did play it as a youngster. I did enjoy it. I started at probably about 6 years of age, but I just didn't have the passion for it. And I think, like anything, if you're not prepared to to practice and train and put in the hard yards, then really it's just a hobby. And that was what golf was for me. It was a good thing to get out and about. I enjoyed it, but I certainly didn't want to follow in Dad's footsteps to become a golfer. I just enjoyed team sports, and obviously I loved contact sports as well. So outside of hitting a golf ball, there's not a whole lot of contact in golf. So I went to rugby league.
So when did you come back to Australia? I read there that you moved back to Newcastle when you were still like a kid, right?
Yeah. So I was around 2 or 3 when Dad had his accident. Right. We moved back full time, to Newcastle, and so we didn't do. We just stayed there really, because that was what was in the best interest of the family. And then from there, really, it was just about plugging back into the Newcastle community, going to school, rather than sort of bouncing around and really just sort of getting stuck into sport, which our family loved. So we tried everything, we gave everything a crack, and which ultimately led to me playing rugby league.
So what are your first sort of recollections of playing rugby league in Newcastle? I mean, like you said, Newcastle's always been like, it's a very sporting town. Like we're always very passionate. We're loyal supporters. So did you have a favourite team growing up in Newcastle? And what are you sort of like your first recollections of playing rugby league? Yeah,
my father was a passionate Parramatta supporter. He followed in his mum's footsteps there. My grandfather was a Balmain Tigers, supporter. He was a senior sergeant in Leichhardt and Balmain. So Dad was a good rugby league player when he was growing up. He was good at most sports, rugby union, went to Epping Boys High. And so it was always in our family. We always used to go and watch matches. But then when the Knights came into the competition in 1988, and I was 7, we were at the first game. And at that point, really, like my father said, the moment the Knights come into the competition, his Parramatta days, or his supporting of Parramatta days were over, and it was all about Newcastle. So we, some of my fondest memories were going to Knights games. It was a family tradition.
Yes.
It was back in the day when, you really had, the home and away draw, where it was, 1 week away, 1 week home. So you could really schedule, a lot of things in. Largely the Knights were playing, on sort of Sunday afternoon games and Saturday afternoon games. So it was a really sort of good weekend outing for the family. Obviously, and also because my family became, so close to the Knights club and the players, we had a really great, connection and relationship with the playing group, where from an early age, my mum and dad would invite, all 3 grades over to their house, and for what's now known as, bonding sessions and whatnot, where you would, have a beer and a laugh and barbecue, and mum would feed, 60, 70, 80 odd, rugby league players and the coaching staff, and it was great, and they were great guys. I looked up to them. They were my idols growing up, and I think that was really sort of what inspired me to go on and want to play rugby league, because you were sort of always around, these guys, and they were your heroes. Going to the sheds after the game and seeing them, happy but banged up or down, and sticking together. They're the sort of things that you wanted to be a part of, and I'm glad I got an opportunity to do it.
Mate, how many kegs of beer did you have to have for the Newcastle Knights team in the 80s and early 90s for a party of 80?
A lot. Yeah. Often not enough.
Yeah, that's right. And did you have a favourite player for the Knights? Was it Chief?
Yeah,
or
obviously when they first started, I was, we had so many tough players. I mean, really, that was what the club was built on.
Yeah.
Players that were tough and had plenty of tomorrows, and it wasn't about signing, the best players and the superstars. Alan McMahon really set a tradition and laid the foundations with Alan Bell, and just it was really about finding guys that were prepared to play a certain style, which the fans of Newcastle expected, and that was, they needed to be tough. They needed to try hard, and if you played Newcastle, it was all about not necessarily the result. It was about how they felt after playing Newcastle.
That's absolutely right.
And so, I mean, all those guys at the beginning, like where you did have your Sammy Stewarts and Hagues and Mark Sargent and Tony Butterfield and Bugsy McLean and Stevie Fulmer and all of those guys, Tony Kemp, James Goulding,
Ashley Gordon,
Ash, they're all, Gary Worth, Brad Godden. I mean, they were all, just really outstanding players that punched above their weight. I mean, when you had guys like Mark Sargent make the Kangaroo Tour, and then I mean, it was a phenomenal effort for him, and as I said, they were your heroes, and when you go and see them go on and play, for Australia and play for Origin, that was what made you stay up late at night, watching Test matches, against Great Britain or against England or France or New Zealand. And they were great moments that I shared, with my father. So there's rugby league's given me far more than what I've given it. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it didn't. Well, obviously you wanted to win, but they tried. They tried their best. They tried their hardest. They smashed them. Like any team, all the good teams like the Broncos, like Wally Lewis and the Canberra Raiders in their prime, Meninga and Daly. They would always come and see Newcastle. They're playing in Newcastle, and I was like, whew, we've got to get prepared. This is going to be like a battle, So
I think that's what the fans expected, and that's what, the players tried to give, opposition teams, when they were there, and we wanted to. It was was kind of, symbolic that it was called Marathon Stadium, and it became very much like a cauldron for people. And, I always remember, like, whether it was a Sunday afternoon or a Friday night when it was, standing room only, and, people were going bananas for the Knights, and, banging on the change room, sheds when, the windows, that sort of were below the stairs, you could actually, bang on those before, that was just right above the opposition, change rooms. And obviously there's all, types of stories where the boys would go in there and hose the sheds down and make sure all the floors were covered with, a couple of inches of water for the team to turn up, because they were concrete with no rubber on the floor or anything like that. And there's nothing worse than when you're trying to get ready and it's wet floor and you've got taping and all those types of things. So the Knights were a formidable team, not just on the field, but, for what they do to teams off the field as well, which is all part of the tradition.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe not so much now, but, we still get the diehard fans. It doesn't matter when we're losing, whether we're winning, whether it's, pouring down, raining, severe weather. They always turn out, and that's what I love about the Knights and the supporters. I think it's great, and I hope it continues for a long time. So tell us about your sort of your junior sort of. It says here you played with Valentine Elibana. Is that correct? You junior?
Yeah, played with Valentine. Yeah, it was I wasn't much good, back in the early days. I think if I started playing in the under-13s, I think if people had have said, would I go on and play first grade, I would have been about, 2 million to 1 and blowing. So it was, but, what I did have was, I had really strong relationships with, a young player called Brett Finch and Luke Burt, who were playing for Valentine. Brett, I went to, he was the ball boy at the Knights. And obviously after each of the home games at the Knights, we used to go on the field and play footy back in the day. And that's really where we became really close friends. And so when I went and started playing rugby league, because my father would never let me play league because I was always too small. And so he said, well, until you're going to turn 13, you're not going to be playing. You're going to play soccer and cricket and other sports because I just don't think you're big enough. So
Clint, can I just stop you there and just can we talk about what you just said there about you not being big enough? And I had the same problem when I was in primary school and high school as well. Are they changing that? Do you think that's a bit of a problem now, like with the juniors? Because you get some of the Polynesian kids and they look like they're 6 foot tall and 100 kilos. Do you think that's a bit of an issue with some of the juniors and like turning the kids away?
Yeah, I'm sure it has some level of impact, but it's not the driving factor of why people sometimes choose not to participate or stop playing. I mean, it's I think what the Pacifica community have done for rugby league has been outstanding. I mean, they take up a huge percentage of our playing cohort now. North of 46%. Yeah, and they are, they don't just bring talent, they bring cultural diversity into our game, which is absolutely significant and is something that, should be championed and acknowledged because it's something that our game should be proud of. I think at a junior level, there's always an opportunity to continually review what goes on at that level around, obviously I know there's been different proposals around weight categories and rather than just age groups. So, but again, I mean, rugby league at a junior level is extremely safe. The rules are supportive of a safe environment, albeit that, when it's a contact sport, you can't, remove all risk. But we've got some great junior pathways, and and we've got, obviously it's a competitive market at the moment. There's a lot of, challenges and, a lot of competition for time at the moment. But, I think rugby league is a great community sport. I think it's also one of the main drivers of why it is so important to have, at NRL level, to have players or have a pathway that if you play NRL, you're going to have the best terms and conditions, you're going to have the best insurance policies, you're going to have the best wellbeing and education support, you're going to be remunerated and rewarded for your contribution, the best of any code in the country. That's what we should be aiming towards, because, for many families, sport is an opportunity to, advance themselves further in life, and, generate impact. And we know that a big portion of our players come from a challenging background, and it's a great way to demonstrate that if you are passionate about something and you're committed to a cause, be it rugby league or otherwise, you can make it, you can play at the elite level, and you can provide for your family and community. And I think that's the opportunity we always should make sure we're championing. Yeah,
absolutely. Well said. And getting back to what we were just talking about with your junior. So, did you have a sort of a preference with your positioning? I mean, you said you were like a little smaller than the regular sort of person in the team. So, was back row lock still your position, or what position were you playing there at the time?
No, I was a winger.
Really? There you
go. Back then, I'm sure it's very different now. Usually, those that were put on the wing back then was like, let's just get him on the field, but let's not even touch the ball a whole lot, and have him involved. So that was where I used to play. But I was also playing. I was playing third division as well. I'd go to training with guys like Finchy or with Brett. And he was like Superman for me, where, when you're turning up for training, particularly in an environment where you're not very good, at that age, between, the ages, I would probably suggest, around that sort of 10, 11, 12, 13, and those early years. The last thing you want to do is feel like you're not connected, to, the people that you're trying to play with. And they can really be the difference of whether or not you pursue a career or you continue to play on in that sport. And I was really fortunate that I had a couple of really good coaches that recognised the fact that I tried hard, I worked hard at training, good listener, always asked a lot of questions. I was always very curious, of how to do things, why are we doing it that way, basically. Tell me how the clock ticks, not just that, how to tell the time.
Yes.
And Brett and a couple of others like Luke Burt, they were, I just can't speak highly enough of those guys, because really, particularly Brett had an opportunity to say, you know what, you're not very good. And when we go to training, you and I can go our separate ways, and then we can just, hang out away from training. But what he did was he created, really a safer environment for me to have a go and feel like I can be a part of the team, despite the fact that I'm not very good, or I'm not at the standard of these other guys. But that feeling of inclusiveness and, connectedness with, really the best player in the team, which Brett was. Played a huge role in, whether or not I wanted to go to training or not. Now, if I was to go to training in that environment, and the best player, as well as another couple of players, weren't, like that, I I probably, I'd suggest there would be a high probability that I wouldn't go back.
Sure.
Or maybe I would have changed clubs. Now, if that happens, I'm probably not sitting here talking to you with on the back of, a career that I'm really proud of. So it's just, you can just never underestimate how much it can help a child when you're in a situation where you're really vulnerable and you just want to be liked, you want to be, part of the team. And Brett and Luke and a couple of others and the coaches, they did that for me, and I'll never forget that. I'm always grateful. But yeah, it was. I certainly wasn't a back rower. It was wing, and then the more game time I got, the more confidence I got, and the fact that I enjoyed tackling.
Moving into the middle.
I moved into the middle. I bypassed centre and halfback and 5'8" because I wasn't a very good passer.
Nice.
So I went from the wing straight to the back row. But it was a slow transition. It was hard for me because I was, as I said, I was small and I had to always try and manage my weight and whatnot. But it's all part of it, all part of growing up.
And for you, moving into the back row, was it something that you had to work on again? I mean, like, what's more tackling, more defense, trying to get a bit of an offload. Was it difficult for you to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it was obviously I was constantly trying to work on my skills. I mean, I wasn't blessed with skills. I think that what I had was, which probably largely came from my parents, was I had a bone deep belief that if I give this a red hot go, I'm not going to die wondering here. I'm going to be able to say that, hey, I gave it everything I've got, and I just needed to understand that I needed to be better than other people in other areas outside of just the sort of the on-field skill. Like, so I had to train harder. I had to spend more time in the gym. I had to understand my body more. I had to learn how to recover from injuries. I had to understand diet and what food I needed to eat and when I needed to eat it, and what drills I needed to do to improve certain things, but double down on the strengths I had. So, so it was a challenge, like, through that period, particularly when you were with, a lot of my best friends were in rep teams, and so when you used to trial in rep teams, and this is back in the day when you used to receive letters in the mail, not emails.
Right.
I used to go up to the letterbox. We had a long driveway, and I used to ride my push bike, up there, and I used to open this old milk can that we had as a mailbox. I used to open it at the top of the driveway, and every time it would say, thank you. And when it starts with thank you, it's not a. It doesn't start with congratulations. It starts with a thank you. You know what's coming. And I got conditioned to understand that, one, that's how they start letters if you don't make it. But it also was important for me at an early age to understand just, the level of importance of rejection and understanding that you have a couple of choices. When you get rejected, you either, let it have a significant impact on your ability to, to press on. And do you really want it? I mean, really, that's what it does. It presents you with an opportunity to check yourself and say, is it worth it? Do you really want to feel this way again? And if you don't want to feel this way again, you either don't do it anymore, or you keep working hard enough to put yourself in a position where the result may be different. And that was the choice I made. And so for me, because I was very curious always, I would always reach back out to the team or the club that I'd not been selected for, and just said, hey, I get it that I'm not good enough, I haven't made it, that's fine, can you just send me your programs? Can you just send me your weights programs, or can you send me some drills that I can work on so I can improve. And then I'll see you again next year, and I'll see you again the year after that, and that's the way it was. And, eventually it paid off, with all the, the times that you'd do it, and Mum would be down at the Oval with a stopwatch, or, Dad would be down there and putting markers down and getting up at, 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and riding my bike down to the Oval or down to the local gym. And, that's the way it was. And, it was rewarding when you end up getting there.
Yeah. And how many seasons did you play with Elibana? Did you, Valentine Elibana? Did you play right up until the Knights, or did you change sort of?
No, Valentine only went till under 15s.
Right.
And then I went to South Newcastle.
Gotcha.
And that was really like a really important step for me, where usually most people from Valentine go to Lakes,
Right.
Lakes United. And for me, I just wanted to do something different. I wanted to go, I suppose, strategically. At 15, I was thinking, well, I don't want to go to Lakes because I'm probably going to be playing with the same group of players. And if I play with the same group of players, I might not get a run as much as what I need to get a run to put myself in the shop front window for selectors and whatnot. So I'll go to a team that sits just outside the top couple. And maybe I can be one of the best players in that team, and South were always, around sort of that, 6th, 5th, 4th, type position. Yeah. So I thought I'll go there, new club, in under 16s. My best friend at the time, Dean Griffiths, he was a hooker. His father played for South, and I thought, well, one, we're best mates. Two, I'll take a hooker with me because then I know I'm going to get the ball. So it was a really good move for Dean and I. I loved it there. It was a great club, and that's really what put me in a position to try and be one of the better players in that team, to give me more opportunity to be selected.
So who in the Knights sort of started whispering, who were the scouts that were there sort of looking at you? I mean, you said your mum and your dad were already huge involvement with the Knights, but who were the scouts that were coming to sort of watch you play and sort of saying, this guy's got a bit of talent?
Yeah, I think it was really back then, the Hunter Academy had just sort of, got up and running, and there were, some selectors, around, Warren Smiles was running the junior development pathways, and I got selected in the Hunter Academy. I didn't get picked in the Knights, but I played in the Hunter Academy, which is, effectively like, we think you've got something, but, not enough at the moment to, press for a junior night spot. So your Harold Matts and your SG Ball, type position, type teams. And I ended up winning a scholarship, from playing in the Hunter Academy. I got the Hunter Academy gave me a scholarship, and from that, I got selected in a national academy team, and just fortunately enough, on the day that we had our national academy, or the couple of days training, was the Knights trial match. Was the Knights possibles, probables, and trial matches.
Yes.
And and they said that, well, it's more important that you go to that camp. We'll put you in there. You can bypass the trials, and we'll just put you in the 40-man summer squad. Right. And now I have no doubt that if I had have played in that trial, I would not have been selected in the summer squad, just because of how trials work and those types of things. It was one of those sliding doors moments that that I didn't have to go on trial, because I just don't think I would have got picked, because there were still other players that were better than me, and those sort of trials, they're very much reliant on relationships that you have. And if you don't get the ball and if you don't have the right team around you, it can be really difficult to make it. So when I got picked in the summer squad and I was, 17, 17, and we were playing under 19s. I was playing a year up. I was told by a couple of people that may not have been a huge fan of me, joining the summer squad because of whatever ability they thought I didn't have. And they said, "Oh, you're just going to make up the numbers. You're not, just don't worry about making it this year. Just enjoy the training and, don't worry about it." And deep down, I was like, get stuffed. Like, you don't know who I am or what I believe I'm capable of doing. And I, just really ripped into my training. Steve Burriston was the coach at the time.
Right.
And I just got a sense that Steve was a very hard taskmaster, very, he was old school in many ways, was like my father in some ways, where he was, very hard, very direct, no bullshit, but also had, a softer side if you were able to demonstrate that you deserved, to see the softer side. So, so I just trained really hard. They said I was, again, still too small. I went on a really hard eating, campaign diet, where I was, I used to have a watch and I used to set that for every 2 hours and I used to eat. My mum used to, pack my lunch pack, which people always hung shit on and didn't want, used to give me a hard time about, me carrying my lunch bag around all the time. And, we'd go to all different places and I'd have this lunch bag and my watch would go off. And even if we were, out at a party or something like that, I'd, be eating. And I put on 10 kilos in that off season, which was a lot for like a 16, 17-year-old. But I got through the training, and then we played a trial match at Cabramatta against Parramatta, and they always were really strong in the juniors.
Yes.
And we played, a few quarters. And I'd played one quarter, and then I ended up busting my ribs. I cracked 2 ribs, and I didn't know it at the time. And when you can see your career like flash before your eyes, it was like, I'm just not going to tell anyone, that I've got this. And so I just kept played on, and then finished the game, and then got x-rays a couple of days later and I'd had a couple of cracked ribs. And but my fear was that the next trial was the final cutoff. That was against Manly. And I remember crying, just thinking like, well, I'm out, I'm done. They're not going to allow me to play. That's it, for me. And I remember Steve was just like, the fact that, you played, which, obviously wasn't hugely safe. But the fact that you played and you didn't, show the sort of pain that you're in, and you kept that, you demonstrated to him that, I wanted it. And so he said, look, sit out the game against Manly. I'm gonna, you're in, basically. And I just was like, this is incredible. Like, as a 17-year-old, I wasn't yet 18. It was an under-19s team. I just remember it was just like such a surreal feeling. And then we played our first game of Jersey Flag at Brookvale against Manly, and I just sort of never looked back. I come off the bench, scored 2 tries, and then started the rest of the season. And we ended up making the grand final that year. And then 6 months later or 8 months later, I played first grade.
Wow. And tell us about being signed with the Knights. I mean, do you get signed to SD Ball and those sorts of things, or is this like you're in the team until you get to a certain age?
I was signed once you obviously play, you'll sign a contract. I think it was, a couple of $1,000 or, something like that. But, it really wasn't until I started playing reserve grade that it still wasn't anything big, but, you started getting sort of match fees for playing reserve grade and, those types of things. But, I think when I played first grade at 19 in, 2001, I think I was on about, between probably 20 and 40,000. Okay. I know I was on 15,000, I think, at that time. But I was on, some good match fees so that's how it began.
And what a year for the Knights, 2001, our second grand final. Now, I do believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were injured at the time and you didn't play in the first grade, but you did actually play your first game of first grade in that season, right? Or was it?
Yeah, I played 7 games in that year, and unfortunately, a week or two before the semi-finals, I just got back into first grade. And really, Michael Hagan, who'd done a really great job in bringing through a lot of, good young juniors.
Yes.
And he was working on very much a rotation system with myself and, Johnny Morris and I think, Daniel Abraham. Josh was starting on a more regular basis, Kirk Gidley, those sort of guys. So, and I broke my scapula 2 weeks before the finals, and unfortunately missed that. Fortunately enough, though, it's just, again, it's sort of, it's just funny how the world works, where Julian Bailey came in and replaced me the next game. He broke his arm, and then Daniel Abraham, took, that spot. And Daniel, him and I played together at Valentine when we were 13, 14 and 15, and he was one of the best players of the team. And it was just one of those things that it was great to see, Daniel win a premiership. And it was difficult not to be a part of it. But, our family's always, gone down the line of, everything happens for a reason. And, again, like I said earlier, you have a choice to make, when these things come up and punch you in the face. And it's, I believe that happened for a particular reason. But you do, when you're playing in a sport that is finite, and your career could be over, from the next tackle, or the next run. You just don't know whether you're going to get another shot at playing in a grand final. And I thought we were going to go back to back the next year when we had a really strong season, and unfortunately we had a couple of injuries right at the death, and Joey got injured. The game against the Dragons in the last round, and then we went loss out. When I really thought that was, that was the shot. I played every game in 2002. I didn't miss a game. But unfortunately it just didn't work out that way.
Yeah. So it says here 100 games for the Knights. It's a pretty good milestone to say that you played 100 games for your local team. So what are some of the highlights in between there? Obviously there would have been some semi-finals. So tell us about some of the good times there. Obviously your first game, what was that like? Your first game of first grade?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the one that stands out is obviously making my debut. Like at 19, knowing what the road that I'd travelled down. The fact that my family had supported me throughout that, my sister, my mother and father, right the way through the hard times, the times when, they would be picking me up off the ground from, getting another one of those letters, and crying and whatnot, and seeing the work that, you would put in. It was as much an achievement for me as it was for them. because they played such a fundamental role and an essential role in giving me the best opportunity to, to play the game that I loved for the team that I loved. So to play there with a lot of my heroes that are still, I'm very close with, in front of my hometown, with my mates, they're watching, that still will be, a really, a significant highlight for me. And then obviously just being part of the, the grand final team in 01 was fantastic. I mean, when you're a part of that and you see what it means to the city and the community and the impact it can generate, it certainly leaves a lasting impression. I mean, just there's so many moments, through that period of time when I first played with the Knights. Obviously, I was fortunate enough to come full circle and go back and play another, dozen or so games there to finish my career.
But Clint, sorry to stop you there. The team that they had in 2001 and then in 2002, you look back at it now and you go, oh my God, how did that team not lose? I mean, it was just spread of international players and just a really, really good team.
I think that we can all. I think if we, our heart of hearts would say that we probably underperformed, during that period. I do believe that we had a team that really could have, created some sort of dynasty. Really, when you consider that 2000, they lost the unlosable game, really against the Roosters.
Yes.
And that was incredibly difficult. And then you win it in 01, and then you get to 02. And
won it again.
And the Dogs obviously, get all their points removed. You end up becoming arguably the competition favourites. And then you get rolled, through losing, your best player. It's hard. And then, 2003, we just sort of couldn't quite find our feet again. And then, 4 and 5 were not bad years. 5, obviously, we had a really difficult year that year with a lot of injuries, and I was out for 13 weeks with suspension and injuries. And and then, we rebounded again in 06. We were there or thereabouts, finished 4th. So I mean, there was lots of great moments. I think the most important part for me was to be able to say that, I played for a proud club, that's that is steeped in some quality history that's been really defined by the people that started the club in McMahon and Bell and the inaugural players. And then, continued on through an incredible era of, Johns and Kennedy and McDougall and Gidley and Badiris and Tahu, Simpson,
Johns,
I mean, the list goes on. So I mean, it was a great time to play footy. Great time to play for the Knights.
Yeah. So it says here in 2001 was your first game, round 7 against the New Zealand Warriors. And you also mentioned too the 2004 suspension for 12 weeks. I mean, how do you train in that? How do you sort of stay motivated for such a long period out?
Yeah, it was obviously difficult, given the fact that I got suspended in, I think, like the second last or last round of 2004. So you've really got, back-to-back pre-seasons that are, you're staring down the barrel of, when you've got, 10 to 14 weeks of off-season training, and then you've got to sit out another, 11 or 12, as well. It was difficult. It was, it went through some really, really dark times, during that period, because I'd obviously injured in 01, missed the grand final. I'd had a ankle reco the year before, then got, big suspension in 04. So it was it was just back-to-back stuff, for me that was really difficult to manage. Particularly when, playing, when your ability to, when the ability to play is taken away from you, that meant everything to me. And so that was really difficult, particularly given the fact that the team, lost, I think before I came back, we'd lost 11 or 12 straight, and it was really hard to watch. So that was a difficult time. But again, as I've said, I mean, everything happens for a reason.
That's right.
I trained really hard during that period. Hagues and the training staff did a great job. I had some time off at a really important time, to just mentally refresh me. And I came back and I had, arguably one of my best years for the club in 2005. And I thought that, it was an opportunity to repay the club, repay, the coaching staff and the players and the fans for missing, a big chunk of the year. Yes, we won the wooden spoon, but I think we won 8 or 9 of our last 11. And it was, I think it was the highest wooden spoon points tally in history.
Yeah, right.
So it was, it was. And I mean, I know Joey speaks about it. It was one of his most enjoyable years in 2005, just because of the how we were on the canvas, and we had an opportunity to put the flag up and just say this is it for us. But I thought we dug in and we had a really enjoyable back half of the year.
Yeah, I was just about to say that you won. I think you won like 7 out of 8 or 8 out of 9 towards the back end of that season, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was a really good part, to finish on.
Yeah, that shows the ticker and the courage of the team. That's great. So 2007 was your last season with the Knights. So the decision was to go to the Melbourne Storm, and in that season, grand final. And you also scored a try in this game as well. Tell us about 2007 season.
Yeah, it was a difficult year, 2007. Obviously, it started with all good intentions, and Brian obviously had come, and he was, one of the most technically gifted coaches that I've had in my career. But, for a whole range of different reasons, just didn't quite connect with, one, what the community expected, two, what the club was built on, and three, and most importantly, just didn't understand, how to get the best out of, the players at the time. I'm not suggesting that he didn't do it at any point in his career, because he certainly did. I mean, you don't get teams to grand finals like he did and not understand, high performance environments. However, we just, it wasn't an enjoyable year for a whole range of different reasons. There was a lot of stuff going on that many people weren't aware of. He and I and other players were just at odds of, really just how to treat people. And I didn't agree with, some of the things that were going on. No doubt I played my part in certain things where I would challenge, him and the staff on certain things. But I also thought that was the role that was needed to be played by me, given the fact that a lot of people were afraid, to speak up. And some of the younger players and some of the other players, so it was, I put myself, I suppose, between, a bullet and a target, and which I think led to, certainly a strained relationship between, Brian and I. But I always had full intentions to, play out my season. In 2007, I was contracted till the end of the season. I made him very much aware of that. I played City Country, that year.
Yeah.
And it was really playing pretty good footy, but every week he would tell me that I wasn't going to be starting or I wasn't playing. And yet every week I would start and every week I would play. and so it was just really strange for me, how that was considered the best approach to get them, to maximise, the performance of an individual. And I just thought it was very divisive, how that was happening. And, that was, one of the reasons why we fell out. And, then when obviously I found out that I was getting shopped around in England, that was sort of really the catalyst for a much bigger conversation, which really came after I got picked for City Country and I wanted to back up for the Knights. We were playing the Dogs on the Saturday and on the Sunday, and that was always a tradition of the club. Yeah, and I just obviously played City Country. We played on the Thursday. I think we flew back Friday, and we trained with the team on Friday, and then we went down on the Saturday, and we trained on the Saturday, and then we were due to go down, and it was, he just said, you're not playing, you're not going to play, you're not going to back up, and that really hurt me, which I challenged him on. And yeah, it probably wasn't, in the right spot, in front of a couple of players, but I just said that, I don't agree, with that. But he was like, well, it's my job to pick the best 17 and you're not in it. And so, which I found hard to believe, but, and then that sort of again sparked other conversations, which really led to him, saying that he didn't want me at the club for 2007. And he thought that I should go to England, that I would be great in England, and that I didn't know the club anything, and I should just leave, and whatnot. So I obviously completely was at odds with that, and so I spoke to the senior players in Badiris and Simpson and Gidley, and Perry and McDougall. And said that I'll play my 100th game, which was the following, which was a week or two after that conversation with Brian, and leading into the game, Brian rested, or left out of the team. Gidley, Badiris, George Carmont, flew Cooper Vernier in from New Zealand. And Jared Mullen was captain at 18 or 19, and we were playing men in Brisbane.
The Broncos.
This was a formidable team, that went on to win the comp. Won the comp the year before. And they were a big team, and they were up there at Suncorp, and we got beat 71-6. Yeah. And every game up until that game, I don't think I'd played longer than 55 odd minutes, because Brian had said that I can't play 80 minutes, and then I'm not an 80-minute player nearly every week, religiously. And I played 80 minutes that game. He left me out there for 80 minutes, and wow. That was the end. And so I made a decision, obviously, that was it for me. Went into the club on the Monday, asked for a release with Paul Harrigan and Steve Crow. Originally they wanted me to go to England, and I said, well, no, I don't have a club to go to. I'm not being forced to go to England, which they ended up coming off on. I promised them that I wouldn't speak about the club or anything that was going on with the club, because I didn't want to bring any more attention on the club. We'd lost Joey, he'd retired, which was hugely, damaging for the club. And obviously I knew with my departure, it was nowhere near going to be cause the stir that Joey had retiring, but the reasons why, would have brought more pressure and more unnecessary negativity to the club. So I promised to shut my mouth for the betterment of the club, which turned out to be to the detriment of me, because everyone had thought that I just walked out on the club just after a big loss, and that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of timing that I said that I was going to go. I told my leading team that I was going to go, and unfortunately, it happened on a 71 to 6 day, and that night Craig rang me, and next thing I know that I was obviously in Melbourne.
Wow. And that phone call, like, wow, like being able to go to that club, how, and everybody talks about how professional it is and, how caring it is. And it's like a family down there. It says here you played 15 games, but tell us about the experience being with Craig Bellamy and with Billy Slater and Cam Smith,
Yeah, I mean, Craig was outstanding from the moment we spoke on the phone, where I was at the exchange. I was at the Kent, and with Joey and Danny Badiris and Kurt Gidley, and he rang and said it's Craig Bellamy, and I thought that he was taking the piss, and and he said, no, I've seen what's gone on today. I'd love you to come and play for Melbourne. Would you be interested? And I said, absolutely. But he said, Clint, what you need to understand is you're coming to the club, not just because I wanted you to come to the club. It's not my team. It's the players' team. It's led by the players. And the reason why you're coming is the fact that our senior playing group, when I asked them, do you want to have Clint Newton come and play here? They unanimously said yes.
Wow.
And so, and he said, that's why you're coming, not because I want you to come, because they want you to come. And they were, obviously Smith and Cronk and and Matt Geyer and Matt King and Michael Crocker and those guys, and that the way that made me feel in a point of time in my career when I was really struggling with confidence, despite the fact that performances on the field weren't necessarily showing that. And I was really felt just completely disconnected from the game that I loved, and to hear that straight away, immediately changes your mindset into rather than okay, what can I get out of this to what can I contribute,
Yes.
and it's like right now, now I'm going to make sure that these guys, I don't let these guys down. And their faith in me will be repaid, via hopefully some great on-field performances, and which led to a premiership and with Melbourne.
I just wanted to know, how long was it before you sort of joined the club, and with the training, how long did it take you before you actually played your first game with the Melbourne? Do you remember? Was it
pretty much when I got the phone call on the Monday night, after we effectively agreed to terms at about 9 o'clock at night, after half a dozen schooners. There was really no money agreed to, because that was not the purpose of going down there. It was really an opportunity, and just sort of to effectively reboot a career. Well, I suppose not my career, because I've just come back from, city country and whatnot, but it was really to sort of reignite the passion that I had for the game. So that was on the Monday night. I was on like a 6 o'clock flight on the Wednesday. So I flew out Wednesday morning and moved down to Melbourne. So it was literally like a 36-hour pack your stuff, and head down there. And I watched the players play that weekend, and I think they might have played against South, and then I played the following week over in New Zealand when all the Origin players were unavailable. That was my first game, and
And just reading about that, it's quite ironic because you were saying in part one that Brian Smith didn't allow you to play 80 minutes of rugby league, but it says here that your first game with Melbourne Storm was 80 minutes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was just, yeah. So, yeah, we played 80 minutes. I remember speaking to Craig at halftime, and he said before the game that he needed a big effort from myself with all the Origin players unavailable. Cooper and Hoffman and Dallas Johnson and Mick Crocker was injured. Kafusi was injured.
Right.
And Matt King was in Origin. Falau was in Origin. So there was... So really, I mean, from a senior player perspective, it was myself and Matt Geyer and Jeremy Smith and I think Steve Turner might have been the most senior guys there. The rest of them were all young guys, like, your Tagatese, Russell Aitkins, those sort of guys were all playing. I think Willie Chambers might have even played. I'm not 100% sure of it. It was just a very, very young team. And, yeah, it was, but I had my doubts about whether or not I was going to be able to, play 80 minutes. Craig had said that he needed me to, just with the bench rotation. But obviously, when you're being told for the last, 4 or 5 months that you can't, you start to believe that sort of noise. And I remember I was sort of battling at halftime because it was in the pouring rain, over in New Zealand. I think we were down 2-0. At halftime, and I remember Craig grabbing me in the sheds and said, "Mate, you're going to have to get through another 40 if we're going to win this game. You need to play 80." And stayed on the field. We won 4-2. Jeremy Smith scored from dummy half, and it was a great moment to start my Melbourne Storm career, and it was just the irony of it also was the fact that I made my debut against the Warriors for the Knights and then made my debut for the Storm against the Warriors as well over there.
And it's not the smallest pack going around at that time as well, right? So it would have been, all the big guys running at you, right?
Yeah, it was a tough game. It was really hard, and but it was such a rewarding win on the back of obviously what me personally I'd gone through, but for the team, more importantly, given the fact we had so many of our Origin players unavailable, to go over there and win was a tremendous achievement for a young group of players. And then we went to Townsville the following week, and we beat the Cowboys by 50. I think it was 50-0. We might have beaten them by, but. They were really 2 important weeks for my, transition into the Storm, because I got to actually stay with the players for 2 weeks straight, start to, get to know them really well. And then I never really looked back from there.
Yeah. And build some combinations, so, and did you sort of obviously feel pressured, but that after those 2 weeks, did it start to sort of, settle in?
Oh yeah, I think that there was always, pressure, because obviously you're coming there from the Knights under sort of obviously, a different set of circumstances, and Melbourne were leading the comp at the time, whilst the Knights I think were in the top 5, top 6 when I left. There is a lot of pressure to go to a competition team, but it was the additional pressure that you knew that based on some of the stories that were getting about why I left the Knights, there was an added amount of pressure that you had to just park and move on from, because you knew that people were probably looking at you in a different way, and obviously I couldn't speak about why I left, or I chose not to, and so you wanted to demonstrate that, hey, I'm here, I'm going to make an effort, I'm going to show Melbourne that I'm going to try and repay the faith that they've showed in me. But also, there was a part of me that wanted to prove to myself that all the negative comments that I was receiving prior to going to Melbourne, they just weren't true, and I could prove myself right rather than proving anyone really wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And to the build up to into the semi-finals and then into the grand final, what was that emotion like? Did you have it? Did you have any memories of that? The build up to the grand final.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a tough campaign. Like we played the Broncos in the first round. That was fresh on the back of obviously they beat Melbourne the year before, where Melbourne obviously lost the grand final, and they had a really good team, in 2007 as well. Beat them down there. Then we had a week off, and then we played Parramatta at Etihad Stadium with the roof closed. And that was an incredibly tough match. Parramatta had a really good side, full of form, and that was a real battle where it came down to, I think, Tahu or Vailiki. I can't remember, one of them. Obviously, I think might have just gone into touch late in the game when they tried to score in the corner, and we managed to scrape through that one. But that was a torrid encounter with them, and then obviously going into Manly in the grand final. There was already some rivalry there with them, but I think that was the catalyst, or started some of the rivalry anyway. Given the fact that we beat them in 2007, and then they beat Melbourne in 2008, and then what flowed on from some of the matches that there. But yeah, I mean, it was a great week. It was a very different week, just because of the fact that when you play in Melbourne, one of the real advantages, you're sheltered from rugby league press, and so you can really just focus on yourself and your team and what you need to do, and you can sort of just blend into the community without having the additional layers of external noise and the pressures that come with that. But just the fact that it's not in your face every day, and you can switch off. And that was one of the key things when we went to Sydney on the Wednesday, I think, or the Tuesday, was really stressing to players that if you don't read the press, don't start now. And just enjoy the time together. I think they were much better for the run from the previous year, where they weren't. By all reports, they were a lot more stressed, the year before, and that week was much more relaxed. And we were out at Parramatta, I think, for the first few days, and then we moved to Coogee. We were at Coogee, and then we moved to Parramatta. And so yeah, I mean, it was great. I still remember, getting ready to go to the game. I remember, the night before, and some of the the team talks and some of the comments that were in the on the news and whatnot about how good Manly were going, and that really spurred us on. In particular, a couple of players that sort of had a couple of things to say, and then obviously when you run out on the field and it was 90,000 or very close to it, it's such an amazing feeling, and then the game just comes and goes so quick. And then before you know it, you're looking up at the clock, and you can't be caught, and you're thinking that this is it, you've done it, and I just remember my father and mum and my family, my sister, and everyone that was there, and just to do it in front of them, whilst it wasn't in the red and blue like I'd probably always hoped. To do it with such a great club and a great group of people under a fantastic coach and staff. It was special.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, with the grand final as well, any specific game plans with Bellamy? Was there any sort of way to beat Manly?
Yeah, I think we really targeted the fact that we often spoke about targeting a couple of their key people. Anthony Watmo was one of those guys. He was on my edge. He was my opposite back rower. Him, Brett Stewart, and Michael Monaghan, and Matt Orford were the main guys that we wanted to target. Monaghan had been playing really well out of dummy half, and he'd been making a lot of meters, out of dummy half, and we had a particular game plan about stifling his ability to get out of dummy half, and making sure that our marker play was really strong. And Orford had made some comments about leaving Melbourne, to go down to Manly, because he thought that was a better opportunity for him to win a premiership. And then obviously Brett Stewart was in sensational form.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, we really wanted to target those guys. We wanted to send a lot of traffic, at Watmo, which worked. And Monaghan, I think, only maybe ran once in the game, maybe twice. Orford played well, but obviously then Brett Stewart, straight after half time, or leading, I think it was just after half time. We were, Michael Crocker came through, and I think maybe with Billy Slater and knocked out, Brett Stewart. So that was obviously a turning point in the game, and I think we went on to score not long after that. So yeah, I mean, we had some specific game plans for that. They worked really well. We'd trialed some set plays that we actually never ever showed in the semi-finals, didn't show in competition matches, but we trialled them, at training. We also trialled a particular move in one of our matches or one of the finals, but we slightly tinkered with it, for the grand final, and both plays came off in the first half, both of them try-scoring plays. So yeah, there was a lot of strategic thinking associated with Melbourne. They were very, very cagey.
Yes.
And it managed to pay off.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also scored a try in the game as well to top it all off. So that was that a set move, or just
No, it was
on the back of some good play?
Hoffy's still filthy about. I replaced him and went over to the left-hand side because I was on the right, and I think he would have liked to have been there where I caught the ball. And I think it might have even been meant for Matt King, but I snatched it and managed to go over. And always remember a really cool moment where I was walking back to my spot. Obviously, just you're soaking it in, and you just thinking how good this is, and then I heard this massive cheer in the crowd, and I thought they were just showing a replay of the try or something like that. And I turned around, and there's the camera had gone to my father in the stands, and he had his beer, and he sort of put his beer up and took just had a massive smile on his face, and it was just a really good moment that I certainly never forget.
Cherish forever. And was the plan always to just have one season there with the Storm?
No, obviously they were working through a process with trying to manage their roster. They were looking at maybe Jeremy Smith going to the Dragons. He still had a year to run, and moving a couple of other players around. Obviously, I'd made a commitment to Craig, through the year, that if they couldn't re-sign me, that I'd go overseas. I didn't want to play for another club in the NRL, and so it wasn't up until really like October where the decision was sort of finally made, because Jeremy wanted to stay at the Storm, which there was certainly no hard feelings from my end, particularly when he had a contract in place, and which effectively then triggered me to go to Hull KR.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah.
And speaking of that, you said you had family from England as well. What was that experience like? And I've heard from some people that you played some of your best football, arguably your best football, over in England. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, I'd have to say, the 4 years that I played in England was, probably arguably the best 4 collective years that I've had on and off the field. Really, like I thoroughly enjoyed my time in Hull. I just think the the build up to going, wasn't ideal because it was a bit last minute. But I had a really good preseason. I stayed down in Melbourne. I did my training, with Melbourne in the preseason up until Christmas, where Craig, they kept me on down there, and I trained all preseason with Sam Takatizi and Sika Manu and those sort of guys that they were really bringing through. It was a really tough pre-season, but I was in really good shape. I went to England, full of confidence. But I was going somewhere completely foreign to me. I didn't know anyone in the team. I didn't have any friends in the north of England. I had a couple of friends and family in London. But you're starting again, and all the commentary around Hull was very negative. It was very much like, what would you want to go and live there for? It's voted one of the worst cities in England and all that sort of stuff. But that also it was the sort of spark in me as well, like that it was like, well, I'm not going there for a holiday. I'm going there to play footy. I'm going there to work. And I didn't want to be another statistic, of an Australian or New Zealand player that's gone to, England and really just, taken a retirement fund and not put in. I was going there to set some standards, and I didn't want to drop my own standards on the back of, winning a premiership with Melbourne. So once I got over there, it was tough. It was pretty hard yakka going over there, where you sort of it's brutally cold. No one really prepares you for what you're going to be faced with. And you're training in the snow religiously, and the conditions aren't great. But that's why being the underdog's hard work a lot of the time, is because Hull KR were the underdog. They'd spent 20 years in the division below, and they just managed to stay up from relegation in 2007. We bought a few good players, and I wanted to be part of a transformation at the club. And there was some great memories. Loved it, and I'm incredibly happy that I made a decision to go to England when the other option was to stay in Australia and play for a couple of premier clubs. And in a time of your career where you're probably nearly at your best at 26, 27. But I couldn't have been happier. And I met my wife over there, and
there you go.
Obviously got a couple of kids, and so everything works out in the end. Absolutely. Our family's always been a big believer of that everything happens for a reason, and I believe that that decision was the right one.
And I read an interesting thing. Like I said, that when you played for Hull, you would start in the back row, or you start in the front row, and then in the second half or at the end of the game, you'd play in the back row. Is this true? Or is it the other way around? You start in the back row and then you'd move into the front row?
I got moved around like a little bit, but I was predominantly always a right edge back rower, for Hull KR. Obviously, depending on the players that are available.
Right.
At the time and how the team's going, you obviously want to try and stay out there for as long as possible. I certainly had I'd sort of got the monkey off my back with the whole 80 minutes, because that was pretty religious, in England. And that's tough conditions over there in winter, and when you're having to cart the ball out from the backfield, and you're playing against some pretty big teams. When you are the underdog, it's tough going, but it was thoroughly enjoyable, particularly when you're playing in front of fans that just that live and die for for their club colours, and that really brought me back to what rugby league was all about. And the people of Hull, I couldn't have been more grateful for the way they made me feel, during my time there, and even the people of East Hull, despite the fact that they just supported the wrong team in Hull FC. They made it really special as well, because the derbies were something that I truly treasure, and I'm glad that my record is a 7-2 record against Hull FC.
Yeah, right. And it says 100 games, so that's another great achievement as well. So 100 games for Hull. And then I see that Phil Gould gave you a call. I think it was in the last year of the contract, and Penrith at that stage was in like a bit of a rebuild sort of period. So what was the decision to sort of come back to Australia and play back in the NRL with Penrith?
Yeah, I think it got to that point where I was 30. I wanted to start to consider, life after football, potentially, and also my partner and I at the time is obviously, since become a wife. We really wanted to see, how we went back in Australia, before you make any commitments, and sometimes it just doesn't work out.
Yes.
With people relocating. So when Phil gave me a call and I'd spoken to Ivan about coming back in the particular role that Phil wanted me to play, I thought it was a really great opportunity, particularly on the back of what I'd just gone through and what I'd been a part of with Hull KR. I saw a lot of similarities.
Was that a bit of a shock, but to hear from Phil? I mean, were you happy to sort of happy in England at the time, or just?
Well, I think obviously, Phil was looking for a particular type of player, and a particular fit for what he wanted to try and work on, which was largely about consistency, consistency of training and work ethic, and trying to not just bring a level of, I suppose, professionalism to the club, but also try and galvanise, the playing group, somewhat. It was they were an inconsistent team. They had a lot of talent, but they were a team that probably underperformed, and that was probably evident by just the team dynamics and how that was shaped, and again, there was some tough decisions that were made during that period of time. But I think that those decisions, whilst, whether or not they could have been managed better, I think that's always about the perception of the people that were a part of it, and only they can tell you, about that. But the players that ended up departing, again, it's sort of funny how the world works, where nearly all of them went on to win premierships. Lachlan Coote, Michael Jennings, Luke Lewis.
Right.
So it was
good list.
it was kind of a necessary thing to happen, I think, for both parties. To move on, and again, that's probably been vindicated now by Penrith winning a premiership as well, with a couple of guys that were part of that process. Or at least, there's a number of people that assisted in that process, where despite the fact that they'd moved on from the club, from that grand final, prior to the Penrith winning the grand final, you can't underestimate the role that people like, your Tim Grant, Josh Mansour, Matt Moylan, those sort of guys had on the club. Even your Cameron Ciraldo, that's obviously played a great role in the coaching staff now. He was a part of that recruitment drive in 2012, where myself and him and Chris Armott and then Louis Brown ended up coming, and Kevin Kingston had been there the year or so before, and there was a bit of a shift there. So it was again, I'm really pleased that I was able to come back and again play for a club that is rich in history. It's got some incredibly proud and passionate fans. Again, largely like Hull and Newcastle, where Sydney would step on Western Sydney people, and they'd be very much downtrodden. And but again, my time in the Western Sydney and the people of Penrith, I couldn't have been happier with how they how they accepted me into their community, and they're incredibly humble community that work hard, love their sport, and it's great that Penrith have now got a premiership, and a trophy that they can, that they can celebrate.
Yeah, and you should be very proud of that, Clint, and being a part of that sort of start of that process. I remember Phil Gould coming on the footy show and all the media just saying, it's a 5 or 6 year plan, we're going to get there eventually. And that's so true. Like, they've been so close the last couple of years. So a real big, congratulations to Panthers winning this year. So, and then coming back to the Knights. So was there talks, like, was it you that wanted to come back? Was it the Newcastle Ball that wanted to come back? Was it coaching? Was it, how did that all come about at that stage?
It really came about. It started with Nathan Tinkler originally, and it just didn't work out, before I went to Penrith. And it had nothing to do with money. It was just more about, roster management and, an ability to go back and whatnot. And Wayne was interested, but it just didn't work out. And so I obviously went to Penrith. But again, I'd stayed in contact with Wayne, and obviously Matt Gidley as the CEO, and when the opportunity came up to go back there, we just had our first child in Penrith, and it was an opportunity to go back, and all I wanted was minimum wage. Like that. That's all I asked for. I didn't ask for anything above minimum wage. Now back then that was about, I think I was on about 75,000. So I'd just come off a couple of decent contracts in England and at Penrith. But again, it was never about the money. For me, I thought that if I could go back there, I could play a specific role for the club. I was never going to let my contractual value or the dollar amount that was placed against my name impact on my level of contribution. I thought that there was a specific role that I was going to be there to play, and that was to support Wayne and the senior players, but at a state cup level, and try and help bring some of the juniors through. Again, try and instill a level of professional standards there, and really it was just about giving the club an opportunity to continue to develop their juniors. But if I played first grade, fantastic. But that wasn't my driving factor. The driving factor was always about what was the contribution that I could make to advance the club in any way, and that was playing the role that I played. So to go back there and do that and work with the Matadias and Lockie Fitzgibbon and those guys was great. And again, it was a difficult time. Obviously, Wayne left after that first season. It was incredibly traumatic for the club and for everyone with Alex's injury. So yeah, it was a tough time, but no one had it tougher than Alex, during that period, and his family and whatnot. But again, that was something that no one ever expects, but everyone had to deal with. And it's so good to see where Alex is now, and just the pillar of strength he's been for so many people and back at the club. But so yeah, that was the role that I played, and ended up staying on for another season. After only probably having one season. That was obviously after the World Cup. So yeah, it was a good way to finish the career. I'm really happy that was that I got the opportunity to go back and give back to the club that had given me so much.
Yeah, and you also got opportunity to play with United States in the World Cup as well. Just before that, right? Was that just before that?
Yeah, it was just after I play. You know, I was at the back end of my last season at Penrith.
Right.
And so yeah, it was a fantastic opportunity to go over there. It was a difficult one because we had a really difficult birth for our first child, and it was touch and go for both my wife and the child. You know, during the birth, but you know, when they came out the other side of it, and I didn't want to go. I'd sort of effectively pulled out of the tournament, but my wife had said, "No, you'll never forgive yourself if you don't go." So
yeah.
I left, you know, a 4-day-old, 5-day-old baby and wife, and went to England. And I thought that we may only be away for 3 weeks, given our draw and whatnot. And it turned out to be 6 weeks, because obviously we won our group and went on and played in the finals and played Australia and whatnot. Which again, it was a great opportunity to go over there and be a part of that. And my father came, and it was just a really good experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And to finish off with the Knights, also a little bit special for you as well. And I do believe that you played some rugby union as well after rugby league. So you know, still sort of keeping fit. Like I read, even up to last year, you played rugby unions. That's correct.
Yeah, I got roped in. I moved to the Central Coast, and we ended up like one of my mates here. He ended up getting me to go back and play. You know, for the Avoca Sharks. So yeah, it was actually really good. It got me back into playing. It was actually a great release for me, like, you know, during like the COVID period, and was under some significant pressure as a rookie CEO, you know, trying to manage my way through that, and which was really challenging and difficult, but also very rewarding at the end of it. But I found that going back and playing community sport and playing rugby, rugby league wasn't available because the league comp didn't happen during COVID, but rugby played, and yeah, we ended up winning a premiership in a grand final, in that against Terrigal, so the local derby, which was good. So my mate Todd Wadey, he was incredibly happy. So it was great to be able to come back and play for, you know, despite the fact it was rugby, it was great to just actually. It's always good winning trophies.
And you're going to get the call up again to have another run next season?
Well, I was thinking about playing for King Cumber this season. Right. Another one of my mates was the coach, and I'd committed after probably a few too many beers that I would play. So he held me to that. But again, we got to the point where COVID shut it all down, and I wasn't able to play. So yeah, I don't know. Well, never say never.
Yes, no, yeah, that's every Chief Executive of the NRL Players Association. It's a huge honour to have this job. I mean, I know it's extremely difficult, but tell us about some of the highlights so far, being the NRL, you know, Players Association Chief Executive.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that I'm incredibly passionate about justice, fairness,
yes.
and you know, standing up for what you believe is right. And I've always done that, you know, through my career. And when I became a part of the RLPA, when I came back from England and became general president, and then, you know, became chair, and then moved into, you know, management as the general manager after my career, it gave me a significant sense of purpose, because I really believed that we had a we had an opportunity to right some wrongs and really significantly assist with putting a bit of a stake in the ground to make sure that players were properly protected and supported, but also fairly remunerated, based on their level of contribution and the essential role that they play in the game. And rugby league was a long way back,
Yes.
on the terms and conditions, and we still are in certain aspects. And so there's work to do. But what I love most about the job is that it gives you a real sense of purpose around, about understanding that you've got players, lives and their families at stake with regards to what you do and what you want to try and achieve for them, but not just the current players, but also you've got to be able to represent the past players as well with regards to where do they, what would they want us to do and how hard would they want to, push to ensure that players, get what they deserve, particularly given, the risks that they take and the finite careers that they have, but also establishing some fundamental foundations that obviously future players can aspire, to be a part of as well. And particularly now for the women, that it is such a fast growing participation rate. We need to establish some really strong foundations, for the women to thrive on. And you've got a great opportunity to do that via advocating, supporting and protecting and advancing the interests of the players, via representing them. And again, I'm incredibly passionate about that. It challenges you all the time, but again, I really believe in the players that we represent. I'm incredibly proud of the players that we represent, both the women and the men. We've got just our strength is in our diversity. Our strength is in our level of authenticity that exists within the playing group and the connectedness that that the players have with the community. And I just really think that we've got such a great opportunity to set rugby league apart from other codes in this country and in our region, both here and in New Zealand, by securing the best terms and conditions for both men and women, because that's what, if I'm a parent, which I am, and if my daughters choose to play rugby league, well, I want to know that they're getting the best and the best terms and conditions, the best support, the best welfare and education, the best injuries and injury hardship insurances and everything that they deserve. We have to try and strive to get. And I think that the game has significantly benefited via having a stronger players association. It's proven globally that the stronger you have your representation, provided that you've got the right values, which I believe we do. The game thrives from that. Because you cannot have a body that runs the game and governs the game, but also is always protecting the interests of the players, because that would be in largely counterproductive. You've always got to have another side to present the perspective of the players, because they're your greatest asset. And again, like I said, I'm incredibly proud of the playing group. They're not perfect, but perfection in these types of situations is not attainable when you're dealing with human beings. But yeah, it's a good job.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Two more questions, Clint, and I'll let you go. So what would you say to a young kid that, like yourself, was a little bit smaller, in his juniors, or someone that wants to play rugby league? What do you say to someone? What advice would you give to a junior player?
Oh, I think that there's a couple of different things. One, I would say that don't let anyone tell you that you can't do it. No one no one knows what you can do except you. But if you don't believe you can, you're beat already. So I think that you'll always get the doubters, you'll always get the naysayers, because that's how they live their life.
Yes.
And so when people live their life in that way, they want to recruit. And for me, that was a really big part for me, was to try and block out that negativity. I probably didn't realise how much it affects you until later on. Where you that early on, the constant negative sentiment that would come your way. I don't know whether I ever really moved past that. It was just the fact that I just I chose to not give up. But I think that always creates some level of doubt in your ability. And that's probably just looking back retrospectively. But that would be the first thing, is that if you want it bad enough, absolutely give it a rip, and make sure that you're the one that decides whether or not you want to stop, not the external noise that comes, because they're not the ones that are going to live with regret. You are. And so that would be the first thing. The second thing, which it wasn't necessarily strategic, but I think subconsciously it was, is make sure you ask as many questions as possible and stay curious, and constantly look for ways to improve and understand and move closer towards where you want to be, and ask questions unashamedly. Don't be afraid, to ask them, because there might be someone else that wants to ask that question. So when you're asking it, yes, you're asking it because you want to know, but you might be helping others in the process. And that can be a sign of strength for people, if you're prepared to do that. And I think that if you couple those two things, the sort of the never give up type attitude with the curiosity and the work ethic that has to come, I think you will naturally gravitate towards others, and you can't do it by yourself. You're going to have the ability to build relationships with people and align with people to help you, along the way. So there's probably those three things: is removing the doubt, staying strong in your beliefs, stay curious, and have the ability to build relationships with people that you're gonna need, to get you to where you hopefully will get to.
Absolutely. Let's finish off with this question. What does the future hold for Clint Newton?
Mate, I try and live more in the present now than ever. I think that I'm always aspirational. I've always got big things going on in the brain, and that's what keeps me awake at 2 a.m. or that I can't get to sleep. But really, my main focus is getting a great outcome for the players, both the male and female players, in the next CBA. That's absolutely the priority, and I have a unwavering belief that that is necessary, to continue to move the game forward. I think we've got a great opportunity to work with the NRL and the clubs and the states to implement some collective terms that truly reflect not just the contribution of the players, but also gives us an ability to champion that and promote it to, this is the pathway, this is the sport of choice, for your girls and boys to play. And that's the opportunity that we have. So that's number one. And secondly, any future that I have is going to be relying on making sure that I'm providing for the family, and I'm spending time with them, and probably need to get better at that. So, but I try not to look too far down the line with that type of thing. I want to try and spend time with my father and my mum, particularly my dad, who's not travelling as well these days. So yeah, but I've got some things that I want to do. I believe I'll do those. But first things first, and that's stay on the path that we're on, and I think we'll get some good results.
Absolutely, and you're doing a great job, and you could just tell by the season that we had this year. Great achievement, true inspiration, an amazing story. You come from, not the best player, but you sort of stuck to your guns, and I really respect that. And you've got to the highest level of your chosen sport, and I wish you all the best for the future. And if I come back to Australia, or when I come back to Australia, I'd love to catch up and have a beer with you.
No worries. Thanks, mate. Your shout.
All right, Clint. Thank you very much for your time.